Well, hello, Wolf, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How about yourself?
No complaints, my friend. No complaints.
I
So,
see you've got the best thing in the world sitting in your lap.
yeah, this is one of them. This is Cheeto.
Hi,
My
Tito.
other buddy's on the ground eating a stick, which is good because that means he's quiet, or at least for a minute. So, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a backstory? Take us.
Okay. My name is Wolf Segal. Those who have been in cannabis for a long time are probably more familiar with me as the farmer in the sky. I've been involved in growing cannabis with a 15-year recess, unfortunately, since 1971, when I hitchhiked up and down and across the freeways and highways of Northern California and Southern Oregon, planting cannabis to the point that honestly, in those places, Northern and Southern California, I was probably one of the first 100 people to plant any place that they're growing there these days. Um, I planted my first indoor crops in 1975. It was sometime between 75 and 77. I'm having a senior citizen moment. Um, but I grew my first crops were grown under VHO fluorescence in response to Steve Murphy's book "Growing Indoors." Wrong one. How to grow marijuana indoor under lights. And I actually got them all the way to flower and flowered them. Not big flowers, not impressive flowers, but I did get flowers under lights on the first crop I tried. A couple years later, Steve put out a second book called How to Grow the Finest Marijuana Indoor Under Lights. And it made sense. So I went ahead and got myself a grow light. Like most people who grew both indoors and outdoors in those days, I loved the smell and the taste and the look of indoor pot, but we all agreed it was no high. It might as well be Kansas ditchweed for all the effect it was having. And I think that if we fast forward to where we're at now, we really made a distinction between being high, which was to be elevated, to be lifted, to have your thoughts fly places that they wouldn't ordinarily fly, and to be stoned or wasted is kind of the opposite of that. And somehow, during the 15 years that I had to sit out, um, being wasted became good pot, and cerebral up high didn't really seem to be where people were going. And it sort of, today I kind of had an epiphany. The pot we've got now might as well be the pot in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, along with the shrooms and other drugs that were used basically as distractions from what the government was doing. It's a very dystopian novel, even though it describes a world where we're pretty much free to use substances. And I think that deadening of the brain, that getting wasted rather than high, I think that hang on, it basically. I thought I had that turned off. In fact, I know I did, but we lost track of getting high, and I think that we're going to find that again. There's a lot of movement back to land races, and a lot of people looking for the things that we got out of cannabis back then. And I like to believe that a huge piece of that has to do with the light we're using, which brings us back to, so it's 1979, and people are growing pot that is basically no high indoors and good pot outdoors, and there's got to be something missing. So 1979 was when I started looking into the interactions of light and cannabis. And that sort of became my little piece of the cannabis world. Is, I mean, I grew a lot of pot, don't get me wrong. But the place I was really able to contribute to the advancement of cannabiculture, which is my term for the agriculture that specializes in cannabis, like floriculture or horticulture.
Love
For me, my little piece of it has been about light and about ways to get the plants more light, better light. And then here for the last 9, 10 years, while using the least amount of outside energy possible, because whether you believe it's man-made or not, clearly the weather is not staying the same. The climate is changing, whether it's that we're coming up on whatever the opposite of an ice age is, or whether we're getting ready to be in an ice age. Take your pick. Clearly, the hurricanes, the insane weather we're having, none of when they drilled down through the Antarctic ice cap, there's never been as many warm years in a row as we're having since, well, at least not since the Antarctic didn't have ice. So it's been a while. And so I started thinking about our usage of light and being very interested in how can we get the most out of it. And one of the very first pieces of that, and one of them I'm proudest of, was looking at when we were growing plants that were 5, 6 feet tall, but we were only really growing that top 12 to 30 inches, what I used to call the grow zone. And looking at that got me thinking about, well, why are we growing all this larf and lumber, although those weren't the terms I used then, when we're only after the primo? And that combined with going into a friend's house out in Eastern Washington that had it was a baseball bat length solid bud coming out of a 1-gallon terracotta, the brown clay pot sitting on the ground. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, I planted so many, I didn't have time to plant one, so I just left it there, and it's doing that. This was sort of the first clue for me toward toward Sea of Green. The next one was the following summer. I did a guerrilla garden out in Seattle, and the way I staged it was up on top of a friend's shed, and I would take a couple boxes of starts down to this 3-mile long by about 75, 80 feet across patch of blackberries that ran along the railroad track, and did my little Viet Cong tunnel underneath, pull the plants down so you can't see them brown and dead from above, and plant in the middle of the patch. That was like a 3-mile patch, and it was difficult because I had to backpack stuff down right as light was breaking in order to not be seen doing it, and then kind of sneak back out, which is really tough because part of what was going on was that this patch was like 25 feet from out from the road that runs out to Carkeek Park along Shoal Bay. So in the course of a summer day, if you counted each vehicle going by and each person in the vehicle, there was probably 2,500 to 5,000 people passing that garden within 35, 40 feet anyways, every day. So I was pretty proud that I brought it off. But while this was going on, I was still bringing plants down off of my friend John's backyard shed roof. And there ended up being about a dozen of them that we didn't get to bring down. It just ran out of time. But me, John's wife, Mary, and John kept watering them a couple times a day, keep them alive. And we ended up with these 20-inch long solid flowers. Still didn't quite get the clue. The next year, we started hearing, my circle started hearing in Seattle about clones and about perpetual harvest. And this sounded really good. And I took the plant that was growing in front of my friend's house over in Eastern Washington, the plants we'd done up on the roof of his shed, and then the fact that it was just the top parts of the plants growing. So in 81 or 82, I did the first deliberate Sea of Green, which was in a 10 by 10 that was full of 6-inch 1-gallon pots. And I think it was 198 of them in there. And I pulled about 3/4 of an ounce of dry flower per plant. 6.5 pounds, 2,000 watts, 1,000 watt overhead, 4 250 watt lights, side lighting, which, oh boy, they're discovering something new. Now they'll call it intra-canopy lighting. The exact same thing we were doing 40 freaking years ago, but hey, it's a brand new discovery. Okay, just like they've discovered clone to flower. Sounds a lot like sea of green to me. And seed to flower. Okay, sea of green, but from a seed. It's difficult to not have a certain amount of disdain for that part of the cannabis science community that, I mean, it may not be very nice of me to name a specific name, but I'm gonna. Professor Bruce Bugbee, who all of a sudden is putting out films or videos, shows you how old I am, videos about the effects of far light and how amazing it is. For those of you who are not maybe students of light, the Emerson effect, which is the interactions of 730 nanometers and 660 nanometers, although it can be a little different on either end and still be the Emerson effect, was discovered in 1957. That's the thing Bruce Bugbee is calling a new freaking discovery. Bruce Bugbee's extended PAR. Bruce, I challenge you. If anyone there that's watching this show has communication with Bruce Bugbee, it would thrill me to compare and contrast conventional photobiology / plant physiology as represented by him and its view of light as compared to quantum or Teslan photobiology, which, unlike conventional photobiology's view of the electromagnetic radiation that we grow our plants with, remembers that it's electromagnetic radiation and that therefore its behaviors are fully described in that branch of quantum physics called wave theory. The things believed by conventional photobiology, one very, very specific one. A photon is a photon. 4 photons results in or 8 to 10 photons result in an electron, therefore 1 photosynthetic incident. Well, that sounds all fine and dandy until you really start looking at the speeds light functions at, how plants perceive, and what they do. This is a very important part of this. Plants receive that kind of electromagnetic radiation that can be called PAR, but when you call it PAR, you're saying photosynthetically active radiation. There's a lot more going on than just photosynthesis. And for 8 or 9 years, I've been pushing for something called photobiologically active radiation. And I believe that, Ken, if you look, you should see, we probably want to throw up the first 2 illustrations, if possible.
Okay, because, was that the data table?
Yeah, the data table is one.
Okay.
And then after I talked about it, the next one. What we're about to see is a breakdown of the intervals, which is it's equivalent to colors, but because I want people thinking about photobiologically active radiation, you notice this is not the same here as there are 2 McCree charts. Notice that here we have, unlike what you'll usually see, we have red on the left, not the right. Even though these numbers are bigger, the reason that red is on the left here is because it's lower frequency. There isn't as much energy in a red photon as there is in a blue or purple or ultraviolet photon. And the proof of this, so you know it's not just crazy Wolfie, the farmer in the sky, making stuff up. Infra is Latin for below. So infrared belongs on a number scale, right? Remember number lines from school? On a number line, lower frequency, less energy, longer waves, and that gets explained in a diagram in a minute, but that lower frequency, lower energy belongs on the left. Higher frequency, higher energy goes on the right. The illustration that says data table, could you please throw that one up? One more. I think it's only one more. There we go. If you look at this, you'll see that not only are there different wavelengths, these wavelengths, and I've put it like this because the more energy propagates a wave, the more energy fills a medium to the point where that medium can't contain the energy anymore, the higher speed and the more frequently waves are going to leave that area that energy was added. So the more energy, the electron voltage, I'll do it this way, the less energy, the electron voltage fills the space, the slower, the lower frequency waves are propagated in. Because they're propagated more slowly, the wave fronts are further apart, and if the wave fronts are further apart, you have longer waves. That's why red, when it's talked about in wavelength, is a higher number. But that wavelength isn't the number that's driving the plant. It's the energy that the plants are absorbing from these wavelengths. So infrared, of the colors that, or intervals of radiation that potentially can drive beneficial, can trigger and or energize beneficial photochemical reactions, things that are helpful to the plant's development. If we look at the full range, it's from roughly 780 nanometers at the bottom, which is about 30 nanometers into what used to be infrared. Infrared recently got redefined. Which kind of blows my mind. If a light wave is this long, how do you redefine what that color is? Now it's a different color at that wavelength. But anyways, they redefined infrared as running at 800. And although most of us are going to be used to thinking of it as red on the right-hand side of a chart, red belongs on the left because it's low frequency. If you could put up the VLF to UV chart. There, that's the one. Okay, here in the middle, we've got infrared, visible colors, ultraviolet. Again, lower, higher. This image is almost right, but honestly, it's one I'm going to change. I'm working on a book called How to Grow Wiser, a cultivator's handbook for growing cannabis sustainably. And I've been working on it for a long time. It's going to be my masterwork. It's probably the last thing that I'm going to publish for general consumption. I'm 68. I'm working hard on getting into what's going to be the last of what I do on my long wind down. But anyways, more energy, right? Low energy. I mean, here, I wish this image, and I'm going to make it so that this ends up being on this end, this ends up being over. I just realized you can't see the little arrow I'm pointing with. Okay, on the left, it should be red, and it should go energy, frequency, wavelength. Then on the right, it should be blue, and it should go high energy, high frequency, short wavelength. The diagram kind of shows you that red squiggly line. each time we're at a peak, that's when the wave of energy is released. And so each of those peaks, these peaks are going to be important in a minute, is where another wave has begun. These are the wave fronts, the crests. So now if you can go over to the, never mind. Oh, no, don't do that to me. You did. Okay. Come on now, pop back up. Okay, you want to be difficult? Be difficult. I'm going to do that. Sorry about this.
That's all right. So you're controlling the screen.
Okay, so yeah, constructive interference. When I'm talking about wave fronts, one of the things that, God, I got to go back to here. Give me a half second. I apologize to the audience.
That's all right, dude. We're gonna get into this after you've worked your way through your presentation.
Okay. So this theory that conventional photobiology follows, which disregards that light is radiation and talks about it and portrays it on images as something other than a form of radiation, really does growers and those who love plants a disservice, because we know an incredible amount about tuning in radio. And radio is just really, really, really slow light. Radio happens in megahertz, and a hertz is cycles per second. Mega is the prefix that means a million. Radio happens in megahertz. Light happens in mostly natural light. Sunlight happens in terahertz. These are trillions of cycles per second. What happens to the light coming off an LED in terms of how our plants perceive them, receive them, is very much like what happens when we're looking at a video of high pressure sodium. Those dark bars that we see, that's where the video has slowed it down to where we're not experiencing what's called flicker fusion. The human eye, the human ability to perceive light, at a certain speed of flicker, the flickers fuse. And now you don't see the flickers. Video captures it with HPS. To a plant receiving the electromagnetic radiation that for the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to call photobiologically active radiation. For a plant to receive it at only in increments of like 1 million cycles per second, it does the same thing relative to the plant receiving that P-bar that it does to the light we see when it's captured on video. There's dark spots. There's breaks in the light. And every time that the signal is lost, energy gets spent regaining it. We're almost to the point where we're going to get into the difference between conventional photobiology and I like quantum photobiology or Tesla photobiology. And I'm going to go with Tesla just because. Just to piss off Elon Musk, if nothing else. So, okay, come on, Wolf. The wave fronts, and we're on exactly the right picture, the constructive interference one, when the different frequencies, peaks, here's our peaks, arrive at the same time, even though they're at different frequencies, the period of time that there's light or that there's energy available for the plant to receive is extended. Now, according to conventional Excuse me 1 second. I'm doing a podcast in here. Please. Sorry, guys outside my window talking loudly.
It's all good, brother.
Okay. So anyways, when the peaks arrive at the same time, they reinforce each other. And the way I can get this across to most people, most of us understand music a little. Some kinds of chords, I'll use one kind. A triad has 3 notes. And one of those notes is the dominant note in that triad, and the chord is usually named after that dominant note. So I'm going to pick C at random. C has 3 notes in it. Each of those notes has a certain amount of time. That it continues to reverberate. That's the duration of the period of resonance. But interestingly enough, when you play that chord, when you divide the same amount of energy out among the 3 notes that make that chord, and you play them all at the same time, the duration of resonance, how long the energy that you contributed continues to have effect. It continues to do work. Well, the electromagnetic radiation we call P-bar, which is, again, photobiologically active radiation. I call it 780 to 280. And the reason I'm stressing that part of it, roughly 6 weeks ago, the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers accepted a new standard. It's abbreviated P-bar. Their P-bar is plant biologically active radiation as opposed to photobiologically active radiation, and it runs 800, the new top of infrared, up to 280. Other than that, same thing. So, okay, they're the American Standard Organization, and which means they're also tied in with the international one, IEC. So, given that they have a little more influence than I do, I'll call it plant biologically active radiation and change my illustrations to go up to 800. But I still, I'm still trying to figure out how light waves change, how the colors get redefined relative to wavelengths. That does not make sense. So what I'm starting to say about P-bar is, for our plants, what receives each of these specific wavelengths is a photoreceptive pigment. It's a chemical thing that accepts certain frequencies of P-bar. Just as on a phased array radar or radio broadcast, you have specific frequencies being broadcast and specific frequencies that are picked up by electronic components that are frequency specific, just as the photoresponsive pigments are frequency specific. And as those signals come in, they are chemically integrated and delivered to the reaction centers. According to conventional photobiology, what happens is someplace between 8 and 10 photons accumulate. When they say 8, but usually it takes 9 or 10 because there's a non-photo quenching reaction going on too that uses 1 or 2 of them. So now, in theory, according to conventional photobiology, for every 10 photons received, regardless of how much energy they are actually carrying on, and it's called, that energy they carry is electron voltage, right? So regardless of what the charge they carry, conventional photobiology, if you want to go back to that data table for a minute, that would help. They say it's all the same in terms of driving photosynthesis. And they say that what happens is you build up your photons, it hits a certain level of photons, thereby releasing one electron, and one electron triggers one photosynthetic incident. Sounds pretty good. Well, not really, because again, look here. Let's say, let's go with some high energy light. Let's go with violet, which, by the way, has been redefined out of existence. Most of us learned in school Roy G. Biv as the colors: red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. They got rid of, they never recognized cayenne, that color in the middle that's between green and blue. Yet every time you look at a picture of charts, you'll see a color, cyan, that's there without being mentioned. And indigo no longer apparently exists. So these things have been defined out of existence, probably, I don't know, because it's simpler, supposedly. But what happens is, where I'm going with this, is that our voltages, here we have our E voltages. Does it make sense that something which carries 1.87, I'm rounding it up, 1.88 E volts, or, even 2 E, all the way up to 2 E volts, is going to have exactly the same effect as something that's at 2.5 to almost 3 E volts, according to conventional photobiology / plant physiology? Yes, it's just the number of photons. Your frequencies only affect photomorphogenesis. In other words, plant reactions. I have a tough time separating those because I don't understand how a plant is going to photosynthesize if it isn't having those other vital botanical functions occur. So what I have hypothesized, and I want to stress, this is heresy according to conventional photobiology, and much of this is speculative hypothesis. I can show it to you. I can demonstrate it. I can give you, someone came up with a great portmanteau. I can give you great anecdata in support of it, but it is anecdata, not, I haven't sat down, I haven't had a spectroradiometer to measure, to be able to prove some of this. But what I believe, based on what goes on in radio, and you can demonstrate it to yourself at home with radio, is that if you're not losing signal, if you don't let your signal break, you don't have distortion. If you don't let your signal break, you don't have to expend energy regaining signal integrity. Signal integrity is the signal is coming in. Every time, at those billions of times a second that light goes dark, it's dead air. The plant's not getting any energy. But my hypothesis is that when you provide properly tuned light, because it's properly tuned, you don't have to expend nearly as much energy regaining signal. And what happens with that energy? Instead of it being electron, 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 there's kind of like a little tail, if you will. And now you've got the electrons coming in like a train. So instead of there being breaks in the photosynthetic process, i.e., build up to capacity, discharge, build up to capacity, discharge, build up to capacity, discharge, each of those discharges being a photosynthetic incident, now you've just got charge, and the whole time it's getting that. And I believe that's why our plants get, even if you give plants indoors a preposterous amount of light, you are not going to get as big or as good a plant generally as you will from plants grown out in the sun. A big piece of this is UV. Some of this is near IR. A lot of this is the unlimited availability of CO2. The second a plant uses CO2, a molecule of CO2 up outdoors, it's got another one ready to follow it in. So that's a big piece of why outdoor cannabis grows bigger. But I want to talk about better. That's the UV. UVA and UVB both contribute to the conversion of cannabigerolic acid, CBGA, into THCA. THCA is what becomes THC. And we all know now that THC is not the be-all, end-all. It never has been. I'm sure you could probably go back and find where I was saying sooner or later we're going to find out that it's really the terpenes, flavonoids, etc., that are the main players, and that the cannabinoids are the supporting cast, the ensemble, not entourage. I might have, overstated the case, but we're finding that it really is in large measure, the nature of our high is in large measure modulated by the other chemicals besides just the THC. But
Wolf, can I kind of tie this in? You went on an amazing rant.
Uh-oh.
But I want to tie it in because I can follow you, but I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience were just like, what is he talking about? So you talked about the chord, and I think it's really important to bang this home. What you really were trying to say was that when those three notes are played together in a chord, that chord extends a lot longer. It lasts, yes. Right?
Yes.
You didn't pound that home, and that's what you're trying to say here, is with delight. When you combine all of these spectrums, it's going to be more like a train instead of a
bunch of those cars where they pump one car at a time up the track.
Yeah, or Morse code, right? Morse code is dot, space, dot, space, dot, space.
Yeah.
A freight train, there's no space. It's just coming, baby.
Yes.
So that's kind of what I was trying to make sure that the audience understands that.
Outstanding. And that really is it. I mean, the difference is that there's a lot of there's an existing, before P-bar, they talked about something called yield photon flux, and that was the light coming off your light that had the potential to be used. Well, our problem with that is we didn't really know what was it that made it usable, and what makes light usable is having the other frequencies there that allow you to hear it. Because otherwise you're in the middle of a static period. And it's a lot to kind of prove this at home, for people to prove to themselves at home. Take a radio, get it perfectly dialed in, and when it's perfectly dialed in, set it in volume that's comfortable. Now turn it just a little bit off of the correct dialing. What happens? You start hearing distortion. That's broken signal. Turn up your volume, which is adding amplitude to the process, and some of the signal that you lost comes back, but it doesn't sound as good because the signal, even though you can't hear the breaks, is broken. Okay, now turn up your volume. It comes back. You're not going to have as fine a tuning. Turn it a little further from correct tuning. So it sounds even shittier. Turn up the volume, adding amplitude. You're getting signal back even shittier. By the third time you've done that, it should be really shitty. But now, without turning the volume back, turn the tuning back to correct tuning. And it's going to be way, way cleaner. And it's going to have it's going to seem to have more volume, because you're not dumping energy into regaining the signal. That's what's going on with our lights. If we're not using either sun or a combination, you can get pretty close with a combination of three other types of light source. Or, and this is what brings me to what was the main thing I wanted to talk about today, which brings me to high energy plasma lighting and a report on where it's at. If you followed, for those of you out there that have followed me talking about high energy plasma lighting in the past, you know that this is the closest thing there is to sunshine. You know that the output pulse is so fast. High energy plasma has an output pulse of 2.45 gigahertz. So that means every second there are 2,450,000,000 waves coming off. And that's a lot of propagation of energy that's being sent out. And Peter Cactus, it's not, it also has better chemical profiles. It's amazing. But a few years back, I met the guy who is spearheading forward development in high energy plasma. I did a dance with them, with the people he was working with and him for a couple, 3 years. They based him, and he said, look, do you want to come and work with me and help me get this out there? And I said, hell yeah. Because, well, how I first ran across HEP, I took a LED that Les Kosev, who is arguably the most knowledgeable person about humanocentric LEDs in the world and knows more about testing LEDs than pretty much anyone. And we had designed something we were calling the Candlelight, and I was at a conference down in Denver, and I walk in, people are walking around with this incredibly bright light. Once they plugged it in, I could see how bright it was, and they explained it to me a little, and I understood immediately that they were not getting all of what was going on with their light, but that what they had kicked ass, just plain kicked ass on any LED that I could come up with or think of. And at that point, heliospectras were basically the best in the world. They had like 9 or 10 different bands. They were really slick. But LEDs, one of the problems with discrete color LEDs, and even where you get into white light LEDs, is that they tend to act like comb filters. There's a light source here and a light source here, but there's breaks between the light they come out when you look at the wave. Even if we can't see it, it shows up on oscilloscopes. But anyway, so these guys had this HEP, and here, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, it really looked like we were just around the corner. So I started looking for investors, and we've been doing that ever since. But in the meanwhile, there's been one guy who grew under HEP, then another guy who grew under HEP, then the experiment that I was sort of on the edges of, and signed an NDA, so it sort of keeps me from getting too deep into it. But in this experiment, I saw 5 1,400-watt high-energy plasma lights produce just under, it was approximately a half a pound less than 15 Gavita DE1000 Pro HPS. Now, LEDs aren't HPS, but there's an equivalency number that most people use these days for comparison purposes, and that's 650 watts of LED is 1,000 watts of sodium, of double-ended sodium. That's, it's not exact, but it's handy for extrapolation. Going that way, 7,000 watts of HEP produced half a pound less than 12,250 watts of HPS.
All right, let's bone in on that math. So you essentially grew a similar amount with half or a third of the energy.
With call it 7/12. Yeah, just a little over half as much. 7,000 watts versus 12,250.
Got you. But you almost grew equal.
And almost the same amount. Okay. Now, where this starts to really kick in, I wish it was me. It was these other people that I was monitoring what they were doing instantly. And I did see the crop. I believe their numbers. I saw what the crops looked like. These were done in separate rooms that were pulling out of a lung room. It was a properly set up single variable, which, most people can't even get to the point of setting up a single variable because it takes a bit of doing. But the thing that sort of hits me right away, or should hit anyone that's looking at that is that it's not so much, okay, you're saving a lot of electricity on the light, but the standard formula used in calculating HVAC per lighting is that every kilowatt of lighting, regardless of type, is considered and should be calculated as making a thermal contribution of 3,412 British thermal units. In other words, the things that they measure heat in. So here's our 1,000 watts of lighting, making 3,412 watts of heat in theory, because that's another place where HEP screws me up. Or not screws me up, but it attacks the assumptions. It attacks the axioms that I've worked with since I started doing light, and I'll explain that in a second. But so we're at 3,412. If it's 3,412, 7 times 3,412 is a whole bunch less than 12.25 times 3,412. So while the lighting would be more expensive, the operating of the lighting would be less, and HVAC would be less, both on capital expense putting it in and on operating expense. Now, this sounded really good and sounds really good. So I've been really eager to get these lights and use them myself, and it was a slow process, but eventually I got 2 of them that are my own, one of which sadly was damaged in shipping, and another one of which was shipped to me after the fact, because I was told, and I basically told the guy in Germany, look, the only way people are even going to consider investing in something as expensive as this form of lighting is if they can actually watch it on a daily basis on a grow journal, time lag down in the corner, and actually growing, so they can see that this isn't bullshit. So I was planning to set up 3 HEP over 25 foot by 4 foot, which happens to be the length and width of my one set of beds in a 40-foot container, and then another 4 by 8 at the end of that container under 2 650 watt LEDs with a curtain that left a 15-inch gap at the top so that light overlap would be absolutely minimal, but air circulation would be as good as I could. There's where my single variable sort of died, because the dehumidifier and the mini split are up at the end where the HEPs were going to be. So that wasn't equidistant. It wasn't pulling from a long room, but as close as I could get it with what I had available. So the one light that got damaged in transit lit up and died. The other light that I got at the same time is beautiful, bright, glorious. The third light was brought to me, and they forgot to mention, look, when these lights have been taken down, you need to blow out there's a thing inside that you have to blow out, because if there's any dust at all in there, it can go sideways. These lights were not ready to bring to market, are not ready to bring to market. Why? They're not reliable enough. They definitely put out the right light, and if you're ready to replace them, repair them, rejuvenate them as needed, it's a little bit like having, I don't know if you remember the Jaguar XKE. It was a phenomenal car to drive. Most fun you could ever hope, well, not the most fun, but way up there, really good at corners, really good in the straights, wonderful, beautiful car, just a glorious car to drive. But if you weren't a mechanic, you was owning it. That's pretty much where I feel that HEP is right now. And that breaks my heart because of the electrical consumption that we could and should be saving. So what's the answer here? We were working on, I should say they were working on, a solid state power amplifier, We had a working prototype of the solid state amplifier a year ago, this past August. There's some refinements that needed to happen to it. And in order to be able to produce it, we have to, there's some major changes that would happen. Instead of using a magnetron, the solid state power amp would let us do a lot more with a lot less electricity and would let it be a lot cheaper. But it still proves to be a pretty freaking expensive light. And in order to do it all correctly, according to what the man who's been carrying the torch now for ever since LG, the big company in Korea that makes TVs and all that, ever since they gave up on their patent, this guy has been carrying it and moving it forward. I still hope to set up a grow that shows why we need and why someone out there ought to come up with the $5 to $8 million that's estimated to bring solid state HEP all the way to UL certified, therefore insurable in the two places, Canada and the USA, that right now represent the single largest markets for grow lighting. Okay, grow lighting. Yeah, sounds good. Here's the thing. HEP with the solid state has a legitimate, I would say about a 75% probability of replacing LEDs for every lighting application except home lighting. It's that efficient. To get there is going to take 5 to 8 million. To get to that point, I need to be able to show investors this is what we're looking at. This is real. So if anyone out there wants to advance science, reach to me. I'll tell you what you can do to help the process. It's if I can come up with $4,000, I can get 2 more of these, including replacement parts, and show you. But in the meanwhile, the guy who has been running the thing is spent. He's emotionally drained. He's taking 6 months off. He's not going to do diddly squat for 6 months. And that's why, as Ken may or may not have told you, I got a hold of him over the weekend. I didn't find out what I'm telling you now about the guy in Germany until this morning. So I almost canceled, but then I felt like the technology has so much potential. It's so important. It gives, among other things, it makes it so that we can grow in light depth greenhouses, putting back the high frequencies that every greenhouse covering except one kind of glass and a plastic called ETFE take out. They don't let anything shorter than 300 nanometers through. That means we are not getting any high frequency UVB. That's many processes are driven by UVB. The frequency specific photoreceptor for UVB has its peak sensitivity at 285 nanometers. And unless we get HEP properly developed, we are not going to have a single indoor light source that is capable of giving us what the sun does. And I think that's silly. When you can light a 50-meter rack with a 1400 watt light running through light tunnels, or rather light tubes, this has been done. It needs to be improved, and there was problems. LG, I still haven't figured it out. The thing that drove LG away out of it was they couldn't come up with a way to get around the radio frequency emissions. First time I saw it and was told that, it was really obvious. Why don't you build a Faraday cage around it? Oh my, common sense is sometimes something that academic and industrial scientists miss. Toward which, going back to conventional photobiology, what really hipped me to that something was wrong is when you look at the sun's the PAR output and you look at par sensitivity, it's almost a mirror image. If you invert the sun's output, it fits very neatly into into McCree's par curve. And what happened then is it got misinterpreted. Instead of building a light that was complementary to sensitivity's curves, it built a light to match those sensitivity curves. So where it's most sensitive, lighting engineers started building lights that put out more red and more blue. But the reason that the plants were more sensitive in those areas is because if you look at a chart of the sun's output, the widest band there until you get up into red infrared is green. That green is wider and higher. So that's why the lowest point on the McCree curve, we've got the McCree curve there, by the way. If you want to put it up, please put up the one with red on the left.
Go ahead, keep going.
Anyways, if there, you see that curve right there, the red line? That's relative photosynthesis. Doesn't talk about everything else. Absorption is that green line. Why would it see that absorption? Right there. It's saying it's not photosynthetic. It must do something else. It does. It helps process and develop. If you've got lots of green light, you're likely to have more anthocyanins. Anthocyanins go purple. They're also really healthy for human beings. They're an antioxidant. They help the plant. Beta carotene. If I remember right? Carotenoids. The carotenoids also, besides the anthocyanins and anthocyaninids, process that green light. And it's vital. Turns out also, where they were thinking it wasn't photosynthetic, they now find that when the chloroplasts in the surface of the plants, the red and green chloroplasts are saturated, green light as well as far red light continue to penetrate. When they penetrate, the green light is absorbed by chloroplasts in the mid-level of the leaves. In fact, according to a study done by Terashima et al. In about 2012, I think it was, green actually has more quantum efficacy in bright light than red. What is quantum efficacy? Earlier I mentioned yield photon flux. That's the amount of photons coming from a light that have the potential to be used. Quantum yield efficacy is the P-bar, the photobiologically active radiation that not just has the potential, but that actually is used to trigger and or energize phytochemical reactions. So what we've got going on there is that the sensitivity curve should have been inverted in order to get an accurate picture of what spectral output from lights to grow cannabis, well, actually lights to grow anything should be. We need to be doing what I'm calling helio-mimicry, just as we biomimic to as great a degree the environment that we give our plants for best taste, best effect, I believe. The same is true with the light. The closer we come to matching, and that's another piece of why HEP excites me so much. HEP is tunable light. High energy plasma tuned in action. And that means we can fine tune to match the light quality P-bar at any combination of altitude and latitude on Earth. So if I'm growing a pre-Soviet Mazari Sharif, I want what made me love that plant 45 years ago. And I want to grow. How am I going to grow it? My best bet of growing that plant is to find out exactly what the soil composition was, what its porosity, its friability is, find out what the soil horizons, Mr. Morrison, are there in the places where they grow. Dig myself a 3 foot, or get someone to dig me a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot hole so I can see what's going on in the areas I'm interested in, and match that, then put the light over it that it should be getting, that it expects to get. And I can't see why that would not then give me, as long as I also follow whatever the folk customs are that the people who are growing it there do, then I can't see any reason why, especially if, okay, one more refinement. If I'm out to match atmospheric pressure, given that they're thousands of meters up, I'm going to have to do it in a hyperbaric chamber, or at least a pressure chamber where I can take it to that. But at that point, there's no reason why what I'm growing wouldn't be exactly what's grown outdoors, under the sun, in the dirt. And only a slightly technical solution. But I think it's important. I think land races are, that us redeeming land races, recreating land races, bringing them back is going to hopefully allow us to make up for all the damage we've been doing to the cannabis genome since the late 70s.
Well, I think Kevin Jodry's already started a project that he went to Pakistan and harvested a shit ton of. Oh, sorry. Come on. I don't know. What was that? And there's another gentleman that's actually on this podcast who's preserved a lot of landrace genetics. So there's hope that it's out there, and there's people that are trying to do the work that would allow us to, bring back some of the really good stuff that we lost over the last.
Absolutely.
So there's hope. Now we just need to give them some good lighting.
Yes, I mean that's really it. Now there's like, I think it's 16 or 17 of the magnetron style lights in the country. They sell for like $2,000 a piece right now, which is $4,500 less for a better light than what those first people who were coming around with the first version of these that hit the market. It's, a third what they were charging, so it's a little better.
Definitely on the path.
And this would be, basically the buyer would get, if you have any issue, you would get a replacement immediately. That's, a couple of them are set aside for that. And these have all been given stress test, given a couple months of run to be sure that they're not going to be a problem. So what I was going with this is, if someone has a light depth greenhouse, unless it's ETFE or the kind of glass that lets highest frequencies through, what you want to do is get one of these, put it on the ridge line, and ideally on a light mover, and take care of your entire greenhouse. Maybe you want 2 or 3. And what you'll grow will have the quality of effect of what you grow outside, but it will have the beauty and bag appeal of what's grown inside, or at least in the protection of a greenhouse. Now, for fully opaque buildings, I can see light tunnels are going to be, it makes sense. Flourish Farms up in Northern Cal is doing wonders. The last I heard, were using heliospectras for their supplemental light to make up for when there's not enough light outside. Plus, the sun tunnels don't let high frequency light through. It's the glass that they're built on, and the number of reflectors that they have to do bouncing off mirrors coming down through the sun tunnel is going to take out probably just about everything from the top of violet out. So call it 400 from 400 on down in height, or in length. You're probably not going to be seeing that coming out of a sun tunnel, which means it's visible light you're getting. But if you've got the HEPs, if you're using those with that, you'd be back to growing basically under sunlight, or at least the right combination. Speaking of which, anyone out there who can afford to get themselves a spectroradiometer, not spectrophotometer, get one. Ocean Optics makes a really good one. They are not cheap. What you want is one that reads micromoles per meter square per second. Oh, I'm sorry, not micromoles. Milliwatts. There it is. Milliwatts per meter square per second at each wavelength. Because then you'll be able to sit there. Oh, here's the sun. Oh, look, this is what the sun looks like. Oh, well, I have to turn this up a little and I have to turn this down a little. And you can fine tune it. For now, that's what it's going to take. There is a really cool thing out there. Let me see. It's called DLI calculator. And they can give you at any time of day what the DLI is at any GPS on Earth. So you could get, you could find out, you could get for, I'm going to stick with Mazar-i-Sharif because it's one I love. The pre-Soviet Mazar-i-Sharif crossed with the early Durban poisons that came over. Someone made something called Afghani that's still in my all-time fave 5. And I'd love to get the true Mazar-i-Sharif back. But the ability to fine-tune is huge, and only to really exactly fine-tune is really at this point only something we're going to be able to do with HEP. But with the HEP, with the high-energy plasma, the plan is once solid state has been completely developed and is out there, we're going to go to a multi-lamp fixture to make it even. I mean, we really want to we want to basically be able to have you program in where it is and match natural. And if you want to play with it, fine tune that. And that's, if we came up with the 5 million in 6 months when he's ready to kick it in again, by 6 months from now when he's ready to kick it into gear again, we're probably 2 years to 3 years from being able to do that. Why is this so important? Because we're using too damn much electricity. We really are. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that to burn 1,000 watts of lighting for a year ties up, each 1,000 watts of lighting ties up 2.5 acres worth of trees. And we're losing too many trees to keep doing that. We need
what was the name of that meter that you were talking about? Because we can
let's see. The company I'm most impressed with is Ocean Insights. They used to be called Lighting Corporation, but it's a spectroradiometer rather than a spectrophotometer. Now, obviously, in real people speaking, they say spectroradiometer and spectrophotometer, but I slow it down so people will get the difference. Yep, those guys. And one of the things they're really, really good at is they've got a faster sample time. Part of what's going on when we've got the standard PAR/quantum meters out there is their sampling rate is too damn slow to actually be counting how many photons are coming in. If the sun is pulsing trillions of times per second, and our sampling is capable of billions of times per second, we're going to miss out on a lot of photons. And really, our sampling is in megahertz at this point.
Yep.
So, best lab grade LED in the world operates at 1.1. The current version, the magnetron version of HEP uses outpulse. One more time. Pulses 2.45 gigahertz. So 2.4 times as often as the fastest LED.
It's a lot.
So we get that we get that flicker fusion. The plants get that flicker fusion. So now there's no interruption that they perceive. They're not receiving dead air because it's happened so fast. They haven't had time to lose signal before signal's there. And that is the thing. That's the secret sauce. And I hate like hell to be having to say that right now, essentially HEP falls into the quasi-unobtainium category. It can be gotten. Like I said, there's a few of them in the country that can be bought. If someone has the money and wants to see if it's worth it, get yourself 2 blues and a red. Put the red in the middle, put your 2 blues, put each one over an 8x8 by 8 foot space and fill that space with plants. Because now, and I think 8x8 is when you're multiple light, because if I just had one, 7x7 is what I would put it over. I'm trying to get reflectors made for them that throw a 150. It would be a paraboloid that only comes down halfway on the plasma ball, and it would throw a 150-degree field of illumination. That 150 degrees, a while back I was messing with 315 watt, 400 watt, and 600 watt medium-size sun pulse lamps, and I was using the PL. They look almost like the spaceship Enterprise, and they were set up to throw 150 degrees. So it was sort of serendipity, but I found out those are the easiest lights to get an even overlap from that I've ever used. It was just, okay, put it here, go there, perfect. No, it was like 100 micromole difference at the weakest spot from directly under to there. It was. You can't see me. I talk with my hands. You can't see me doing all the things I'm doing as I talk.
That's probably a good thing.
Say again?
I said that's probably a good thing.
It probably is. You'd think I was Italian or Argentinian.
Yeah. Speaking with your hands.
But I'm hoping someone out there is going to understand how important this is. If we can get HEP, we can probably cut total worldwide electrical consumption for lighting by about 50%.
Well, that's exactly why nobody will, because they don't want that.
Well, that's why some won't, but there are a few out there. I can only hope. And honestly, if I thought it would work, I would be flogging myself half to death working on getting crowdsource funding. But 8 million is a lot of freaking money to try and raise that way. But that 8 million, I mean, honestly, that 8 million buys 20% of the parent company, which by the time we get it to that point, one of the other things is it will allow replacement of cell towers because the solid state power amplifier, the prototype that we came up with, or that has been out there for over a year this past August, also will allow replacing cell towers. Every cell tower on Earth could be replaced by a small unit that's built into the streetlights that are the HEP streetlights.
Nice.
So, I mean, kind of slick, really.
Yeah, very slick.
And, we have the possibilities to do these amazing things. We can't let we can't let anything get in our way. We got a world to save. I don't have progeny coming, but a lot of you folks out there do. It would be very, very cool if you could know that the world's going to be livable when your grandkids are out there. And they're not like walking around in radiation suits and masks sending messages to the rich people on Mars.
Right.
You know my reference is there, of course.
Of course. You know what? Let's do this. Let's bounce into the two questions. It's 50
Okay.
earlier than I normally do it, but I've got to close the shade. Otherwise, I'm going to get blinded when this fog burns off.
Not a problem.
So that'll give me a second to do that. While
Okay.
Ken pushes out the questions.
Sure.
Come on.
Our first question. Any effects on a high-end diode spec to put X frequencies of light in using a cheap power supply that delivers consistent, no so clean DC?
I'm not really understanding the question. Let's see. Any effects on? Okay, there aren't any diodes involved in HEP. The diodes that are out there right now on LEDs, even even if you throw in one of those mint greens that some of the companies are now adding, it just LED is a dead end. It really is. It can. If we don't get HEP, LED is going to allow us to use less electricity. But anyone out there, any LED manufacturer that wants and is willing to face a challenge, I'll sit with a CMH, some red supplement. Well, in fact, I wouldn't even need the red supplement. CMH, 1,000-watt CMH, and some Solar Super Bees, and I will outproduce and outquality anything. Phos, you out there? Anthony, anyone? This is a challenge. I'll be happy to show you what I'm saying about LEDs and diodes acting as comb filters. You cannot get a continuous wave. It's impossible with LEDs.
Okay, and then our other question was, do you see plasma price coming down anytime soon, possibly to match LED prices?
The lowest you're ever going to see them is those ones out there that are 2K a piece. Sounds like a lot. Now think about the HVAC that you're not going to have to use. That it really... CapEx is higher, but OpEx for both your lighting and your HVAC is substantially lower, which, by the way, is another part I needed to talk about because HEP is a little bizarre in that respect, too. At 3,412 1,000 watts of lighting, that 3,412 on HIDs mostly comes out the front of the light, and on LEDs mostly comes out the back of the light. Putting my hand on top of an HEP box that's been running for an hour, I can leave it there. It's not going to burn. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but it won't burn. Now, the Faraday cage that was built to prevent the radio frequency emissions that drove LG away from HEP. I just can't believe that their high-end scientists couldn't figure that out, but they didn't. The Faraday cage encloses, it's like a wire grid cage or mesh cage that's around the lamp, and it's maybe 1.5 to 2 inches at most from the center of the plasma. That plasma is burning at the same temperature as the sun. It's contained by microwave radiation, and the lamp is spinning. The sphere that's the outside of the lamp, it's like glass, quartz borosilicate. Then you can't see my, yeah, you can if I lift them up here. Glass, then the microwaves, and then the gas. And it's spinning so fast you can't see it spinning. But when I touch the Faraday cage, right, I can touch the back, so it's not coming out the back, or a little is coming out the back. But in theory, if you're that close to 6,000 degrees and there's heat coming out, that should be, if it's not red hot, it should still burn you. It's so hot, you shouldn't be able to touch it. You can. I have, again, purely speculative hypotheses as to why there seems to be less than 3,412 BTUs coming off of 1,400 watts of light, or of light in. Maybe the microwaves somehow hold the NIR in. That seems unlikely. I mean, I don't know how that would happen. The other possibility is that it may be that there's ultra long infrared, like not near, but either far medium or far infrared, and that the BTUs are then coming out as non-thermal infrared. I'm not comfortable with that either. I don't have a good explanation, but I know that I shouldn't be able to touch either of them after an hour of operation, and yet I can. So I know it's putting out a lot less heat. And that is where your costs are going to come down quite a bit, is your HVAC. If you're setting up an operation, your CapEx is going to be less on HVAC, not as much less as your lighting will go up, but your operating expenses on both your lighting and your HVAC will more than make up for what you've put out one time up front. I know that right now I regard FOS as probably the best out there. There may be others, and if anyone wants to say they're better than FOS, if FOS will throw a light up, I'll do a completely objective comparison. We can do a single variable grow off with them, which, by the way, is one of the things I want to do in this place that I might be able to get in Maine if I can get the down together. If so, I'm going to start a consumer reports, which basically will be for doing objective testing, non-manufacturer sponsored testing of grow gear, genetic sequencing, and full compound testing. And then for those growers, large-scale growers that want to bomb-proof their varieties, they give them to me. I'll spend 2 years on them and then breed the survivors and hand them back. Bomb-proofing. I think that, and that ties in with this. I'll talk about the place in Maine in a minute because it's pretty special. But HEP is the future of lighting if we make it. If we don't, then we are not being good stewards of either cannabiculture or our planet. That's just how it is. So the place in Maine I want to talk about, and then I will answer. If you got questions, throw them up there. I love to talk about light. I love to talk, but this place in Maine, I do. This place in Maine I started looking at about a year ago and couldn't find the down payment for it. It was originally $1.9 million. It has been in business as a medicinal cannabis supplier for 20 years legally. It is in the black. The owner is older than I am, and there are people that are older than I am. I know it, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes. But the owner wants to retire. I thought lined up someone, but they turned out to be straight freaking scam, and it was real obvious. Fortunately, early on in the deal, basically they tried conning me out of samples of my work before putting the money up to invest. And since I didn't know them previously, they were just a voice on the phone. No freaking way. I mean, really? Yeah, you want me to send a strange voice on the phone who says that? Anyways, turned out that they were bullshit, and that fell apart. That was probably 5, 6 months ago. Well, the real estate guy and I get along really, really well, and he's been talking to the owner, and the owner and real estate guy are pretty sure that. Well, let me rephrase this. The real estate guy is sure if I go to with 100 to 200 grand and say I want to use this for a down payment, they do an owner contract. I've spent the last month or two, besides hunting for HEP money, it hasn't happened yet. But since then, it looks like maybe I'm going to work a deal where I go manage the place for 2 years for a very minimal draw against a quarterly bonus that I'm then going to apply all but the draw to the down payment for 2 years. And then on it. If that happened, the American College of Cannabiculture will be located there. A place set up like the Motorcycle Mechanics Institute down in Phoenix, where you learn each specialty, and then when you've got all of your patches for a specialty, then you're certified for that specialty. And then when you've got all of your specialties certified, you'd get your journeyman grower. I don't like that master thing. I know 6 people I'd consider masters, and 4 of them would laugh if you called them that. In fact, they'd get insulted. But it's got what else? Oh, besides having been a producer for the last 20 years, they have a license. They have a farm store dispensary. They have a grow shop, and they have a special events venue license. This place could be the most fun place on the East Coast. It could be where the bud and breakfast is that you and your loved one come to be. We'll take you fishing. It can be a really great experience. Again, if I can get it together to do it. If there's an angel out there who thinks it sounds like a great idea, get my contact information. I'm on, I'm on LinkedIn as Michael Segal. I'm on Facebook as Wolf Segal, Michael Wolf Segal, and Michael Segal. Also, I think the Farmer in the Sky Radio Hour and a bunch of other things. But, if you want to help move HEP forward, please do. If you want to get yourself in on a pretty well-developed plan that if we put an NDNCA in place, I'd be more than happy to go over what I want to do with the place. I have most of my brainstorms end up with someone else finding the golden pot at the end of that rainbow.
Funny how
I'd like it to. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's funny how that works.
Isn't it? Not that funny. Not after a while, and it just, I would like to see, and this is one of the things I want to do a model of, is I would like for every state that allows home grow, and I think that if they don't allow home grow, it's not legal. They have not legalized it. They've lied about it. But I would like to see people able to buy a grow-it-yourself kit, get a certificate for whatever the number of plants their state allows, and be able to take that to a state-licensed nursery and get ready-to-flower plants that they can then finish out. What we used to call teeners when we were selling clones, cuts, et cetera. So, wouldn't that be cool? You've never grown, but you want to. You found a kind that works for you. You go, you buy the grow-it-yourself kit. You take your certificate, your voucher to your state nursery, trade it in. They of course give us a little better rate than retail because they're going to get a lot of business, I hope. And now the consumer doesn't have to go through nearly the number of changes learning to grow something worth smoking. They'll have it. It'll make it easy. And the easier it is for people to grow their own, the less potential for abuse there is. Because there is potential for abuse. I mean, you know, I've been involved with cannabis literally since before I was born. My mom was a Greenwich Village beatnik. My father was a Greenwich Village beatnik. They were puffing pot with their friends Kerouac, Gross, some people who are familiar with the American artistic avant-garde in the mid-'50s will recognize these names. Jack Kerouac, Sally Gross, Mary Travers, Alan Lomax and his kid. These were the people my parents were friends with in the 50s. My mom was puffing reefer before I was born, while I was in her. So pot's been part of my life all my life. I smoked pot voluntarily for the first time when I was 12. The fact that I call it pot should sort of pinpoint when in history I got into it. By the way, for those that don't know it, pot is, according to Martin Booth's History of Cannabis, pot is probably an abbreviation for patagaya, which was an intoxicating drink made in Mexico using cannabis. So that may very well. So if that's cultural appropriation, mea culpa. I like the word pot. But anyway, so I smoked pot for the first time when I was 12. I sold my first pot when I was 13, 55 years ago. The first lid I ever bought was an actual lid, a handful of pot stuck on the lid of a tobacco tin. And the size of your lid depended on how much your dealer liked you. I sold my first lids in 1969 at 13. At 14, I was one of the biggest pot dealers in Bellingham, Washington. This is what I'm meant to do. I don't have kids. Our culture, cannabiculture, growing cannabis in America, particularly indoors, is my legacy. All of you that do that are the children of my heart and my brain. You are my family. And if you don't like Wolfie, tough shit, we're still family. Seriously, I would not want anything bad for any of you, even those of you who made the wrong decisions last month. We need to make this planet healthier. We need to grow wiser, and growing wiser means growing greener, means doing what it takes to make it right for all of us. So please, if you can help.
Great words, my friend. Great
You're welcome, Lone Star.
And you got a couple more questions, so let's pop back.
All right.
Okay. Sure. Make me work. Yeah. Okay. Question. I run my HPS 600 watt lights dimmed down to 400 watts. Is there a spectrum difference between these two settings?
Let me start out with that you're making unnecessary heat. If you can turn your ballast down, get yourself a pair of 400 watt HPSs. They will run cooler. Same amount of light, they'll run cooler. But yes, when you turn it down, you've got less energy there. You're red shifting slightly because there's less energy driving it. But honestly, get yourself, right now you can get a 400 watt HPS lamp. I think they're like $20, $25, something like that, and be getting a Hortilux, even though Hortilux is no longer in business, which breaks my heart. They came into horticultural lighting basically when I dragged them into it back in the 80s. I used to read, I was general manager and chief operating officer of a company called Hydrotech that had stores in Seattle and Portland. And I was reading, being the nerd that I am, the lighting geek that I am, I was reading an engineering bulletin. And here was this light. It was a sodium light that would screw into and run into a socket being driven by a halide ballast. And at that point, we had already gone through a couple of changes. We'd started out growing under stolen mercury vapors, then stolen halides, then store-bought halides, then store-bought halides flowering under HPS, then oh wait, that's not entirely right. Grow under HPS and halide combined and switch to all HPS. So we went through all of these changes, and I forgot where I was going with that.
You lost that lighting company. You were talking
Oh, okay.
about.
So I was running this lighting company. Thank you. And I'm reading this bulletin, and here's this ballast or this bulb, and to me, it's like Cheech and Chong were angels singing the Hallelujah chorus, because it just, oh my God, with that lamp, all any of our clients have to do to change the sodium is unscrew the halide and screw in the sodium. I got to try this. Well, the company that had sent us the engineering bulletin, turns out they didn't have any and they didn't feel like carrying any. It took me going and finding someone who was familiar with kanji, the Japanese formal written language, writing a letter to Iwasaki, the company that eventually did business in North America as Hortilux, begging them to please, please, please send the wholesaler a case of those and I would buy them. And at that point, when the parent company told the wholesaler, you have a customer for these, please carry them, they did. I tried them, and I really, really, really liked them. Why is this running low on power? So I tried them, and I really, really liked. I might be running out of battery here in a minute. I did plug it in. Why are you not doing what you're supposed to? Okay, right there. So, anyways.
So you got them.
So I got them, and I tried them, and I liked them. And at that point, my writing partner, Kevin Bjornson, the owner of the company of Hydrotech, and he was actually the senior of us on writing. He had been the farmer in the sky for about a year before I started helping him with it. We wrote about him. I tried them. I liked them. We wrote about them. People started buying them. Before long, they were asking, well, does this company make halides? Does this company make sodiums? And of course, yeah, we ordered them. The company in LA went ahead and sold them to them. And sometime between 28 October 1989 and 24 February 2005, Iwasaki started doing business in North America as Hortilux. And then I think it was like 2 years ago, they stopped doing business, which kind of sucks, but oh well. But that was how Hortilux came into horticultural lighting. And going back to was a little, LEDs are comb filters. They break the wave. You can use the Grower's Choice Master Pursuit 1000, which has two 500-watt CMH bulbs in it. They've got like 4 different colors. They've got 3K red enhanced, 4K, and 10K. So you can actually sit there, and by changing lamps, you can change the spectrum.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we might have just lost them. Yeah, I think we might have just lost them, Leighton.
Damn. He was just getting into it too. Fuck.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, we'll have to get him back on, and I'll definitely remind him that he's got to have a full battery coming into it, and he's definitely got to be plugged in if he's going to use his phone again.
Well, I don't think he's using his phone. He's using a laptop, but I think his battery on the laptop is having an issue.
Oh, gotcha. For whatever reason, it wasn't charging.
Yeah.
So that was our last question, correct? Not that I could have answered them, but
yeah, no. The only other question was on temperature. So yeah, it wasn't really
Oh,
or,
yeah, that was a
whether
good
it was
question.
breaking some laws.
Yeah,
laws of
yeah,
physics.
the laws of thermodynamics, and absolutely they are. Absolutely, it's breaking the law because how can you have 6,000 degrees within 6 inches of your hand and not flash fry your hand right off, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it's a combination of the Ferdi cage, the microwaves, the gases that are suspending it, but there's something that was preventing that heat from escaping. And that was the other piece of the puzzle that he didn't have a time to talk about. But that's why they have to go through URL because you basically, if your mini sun cuts loose in your house or your shop or your, wherever, your tent, you're going to burn the fucking place down. So that's why it's so important that that technology be allowed to go through the process of getting approved so that your insurance company won't just say, oh, well, you burned your house down because you had something that was illegal. That's why the 2 years and the $5 to $8 million, a lot of that is through getting through the regulatory hoops, not just the development. They have the development. Some of that's going to go toward manufacturing and setting up, equipment and so forth. But the vast majority of it was probably going to be getting tied up in the regulatory BS. But anyway, that was. Oh,
All right.
you're back. All right. Do you remember?
So everyone can see and hear me in theory, and I'm turning up my volume. Can you hear me?
You
Can
sound great.
you not turn your phone a quarter turn? Oh. You must have pulled it out of a socket or hit the wrong button.
Oh well, that's good. We know he'll come back on, so we can just sit tight for another minute.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I think it may be the gases are grabbing the heat and maybe even reflecting it back and having it being reused in the plasma stream.
It's a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon for sure. But and probably one that's going to be not too easy to unleash or unlock because again, it breaks too many laws of thermodynamics. It probably breaks 3 of them right off the top. So, and that's typically when anybody sees that, they go, oh, that's bullshit. But I'll tell you this, you look at a magnet motor, that's perpetual motion, motherfucker.
Okay.
That's breaking one. So anyway.
I've got this turned all the way up. Yes. I should be hearing you guys.
Can you hear
us?
But I'm not.
Oh, right. You're unmuted.
Yeah. You should be able to hear us.
Can you see us?
I don't know why it's not letting me do this. Well, guys, it's been fun. I'm starting to get frustrated. I really appreciate you giving me a podium. Hopefully, I'll have some really good news for you sometime here in the near future. You're up in Canada. If I manage to get the place in Maine, I'm only going to be about an hour and a half to 3 hour drive from you.
Well,
Leighton, love you. Love what you're doing. Glad you're as much of a dog person as you are. We all need to be. Take care. Love you guys. Audience out there, remember, growing greener is growing wiser. Bye-bye.
Well, we'll definitely get him back on again.
Yeah. He's trying to figure out. There he goes.
Technical challenges. Anyway, so, well, I guess why don't we wrap up unless the audience had another question, but it doesn't look like it. So, I'll wrap up because I have to start walking the dogs earlier now because it's getting so dark early.
You only got another 3 weeks of that, then it'll start getting longer again.
Yeah, I know, but it takes 2 months for us 2 to 3 months for us to get back to where it's tolerable. We have light till 6 p.m.
Oh wow! Come up to Canada, bro.
I can't help it. I'm a light creature, a light being, whatever you want to call that.
Well, put it this way: we're below 0 Fahrenheit here. Although we are going up to just right around freezing daytime temperatures for the next week in December.
Oh man, that's early.
Yeah. Oh, that's Alberta for you, man. Come on. Anyway, brother, love you. You guys take off. Guys in chat, sorry for starting or having the show set to show I was starting an hour early. That was my mistake. That's twice in 2 years, so I'm not doing too bad. But guys, peace out. We love you all.
Thank you, Ken, for all the hard work you do, my friend. And do you have any other announcements for housekeeping?
I know, just check out the show on Wednesday. I'm not sure what Andy wants to talk about, so you'll have to wait until he lets me know so I can let you guys know with the title and everything. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, guys, subscribe. Click on the notifications so you can get them as soon as they come out.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
Peace, everybody.